Hi everyone, and thank you all for making the time today. I'm Jacob Janal, and I'm with IVO Systems, a construction operations software platform supporting the field and equipment side of daily operations, including equipment tracking, telematics, maintenance, inspections, and operational visibility. I'm joined by Gary Zimmerman, Director of Strategic Partnerships at eBacon, a platform supporting the payroll and compliance side, including time and attendance, certified payroll, prevailing wage, fringe calculations, and compliance reporting. It's great to be here with you all to talk about two incredibly important challenges that nearly all construction companies face: equipment operations and payroll compliance. We're excited to be joined by Hensley's Paving and General Engineering for today's Contractor Spotlight. The goal today is pretty simple. We want to hear directly from Hensley's about what their processes looked like before, what changed after implementing eBacon and IBO, and what they would tell another contractor considering a similar setup. We'll start with quick introductions, spend a few minutes giving background on eBacon and IBO, highlighting how both platforms can help your business, and then most of the conversation will be a live session with the Hensley's team. We'll also leave time at the end for audience questions, so feel free to submit those in the chat as we go. From there, before we get into the software side, I want to start with the people actually doing the work. So we're joined by Rebecca and Duke from Hensley's Paving and General Engineering, a California contractor working across paving, grading, earthwork, and general engineering projects. Rebecca, I'll start with you. Could you briefly introduce yourself, Hensley's Paving, the type of work you do, and your role?
Sure, I'd love to. Hi, thank you for having us this morning. My name is Rebecca Hensley. I've been with Hensley's Paving now for 22 years. It's our family business that I'm proud to be a third generation owner of with my cousin Daniel. My main role here is payroll, but like most people, I wear several different hats. I do things from contracts, insurance documents, billing, human resources, and everything else that lands on my desk throughout the day.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And Duke, could you also introduce yourself and kind of describe what your day to day looks like on the equipment and maintenance side?
How's it going? My name is Duke Creech. I've been a diesel mechanic for about 14 years now. I've been with Hensley's 2 of those years. Coming in, I was just a mechanic, and then I took over the shop. I'm more of like a foreman now. I still do repairs day to day, but I also do the paperwork aspect and scheduling as far as repairs and just maintain the shop flow in general.
Fantastic. Awesome. Well, thank you both. That context is super helpful. And since Gary and eBacon are joining us today, I'm going to hand it over to Gary for a few minutes to give an overview of eBacon and how they support contractors on the payroll and compliance side. So, Gary, I'll turn it over to you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jacob. And thanks, everybody, for joining us today. Thanks for IVO for hosting this session. And especially thanks to Duke and Rebecca for joining us and giving us the context. And we are really here to hear from the two of them. But prior to that, we've got folks here that have joined that are familiar with IVO and unfamiliar with eBacon and vice versa. So just real quickly, as far as who we are and what we do, we are a 23-year-old company that started as a boutique payroll company, sort of an alternative to some of the huge payroll companies out there. About 8 years ago, we had a construction client here in Arizona. We're located in Phoenix, Arizona, headquartered. And they were doing prevailing wage construction work. And they hired a new CFO. And that CFO was spending the majority of her work week doing prevailing wage payroll and the prevailing wage payroll reporting, probably upwards of 30 to 35 hours out of her 40-hour week. And she came to us and said, look, they didn't hire me to do this all week long. You're my payroll company. So is there some way you can help us? And our co-founder and owner, who is also a developer, sort of took that as a challenge and worked with this client for about 3 months and got her 30 to 35 hours down to more like 30 to 35 minutes. And at that point said, you know what, this is something that we really need to focus on. And so ever since then, we've been operating under the banner of eBacon. If you haven't figured that out, it's a play on the Davis-Bacon Act, which Congress established almost 100 years ago, that put into place prevailing wage payroll and all the details that go along with that. And so we have a homegrown system that is built specifically for the construction industry of all kinds, but particularly strong for those that do prevailing wage work. And we are partners with IVO Systems, and since they deal with heavy civil, most of the time heavy civil folks are doing prevailing wage work, and so it's a great partnership for us. So what we do is like I said, we're an excellent option for any construction company, and we are specifically a great option for those that do prevailing wage. In addition to our payroll, we'll talk about it a little bit more, but we also provide fringe benefit management with a unique option for handling fringe dollars. We use what's called a bona fide fringe trust. We like to think that our fringe trust has some unique abilities that are not available out there in the market. So we'd be happy to speak with any about how they're handling their fringe benefit dollars when they're doing their prevailing wage. So real quickly, some of our capabilities, we can start with time and attendance. Time and attendance is built right into our platform. It's not required that you use it. If you already have another way to collect time and attendance, we have 5 different ways that we can import time into our system, but we do have our own. And one of the ways is that we have a GPS-based mobile time tracking. Again, it's up to the client whether we turn that GPS on or off. During that time and attendance process, the workers are able to choose the job they're on, the task they're performing. They're also able to switch that in the middle of their shift, which, if you know anything about prevailing wage, that can become a real problem if people are working a couple hours on one task, a couple hours on another task. Well, we often, we also have offline data capture. So if your workers are out in the field somewhere where they're not on internet capabilities, the phone stores those punches. And when they get back to where they have internet access, those punches then push to the system. Obviously, prevailing wage compliance is big. We handle all of the different wage determinations and classifications. We manage all of those rates, including scheduled increases, which is where some folks have problems because they don't realize that their wage rates are going up in 6 months or what have you. We handle all of that. And then we also handle all the certified payroll reporting there in the third box, whether that's state reporting, federal reporting, whether it's eCPRs that a general contractor or a job owner is requiring you to fill out, like LCP Tracker or some of the others. We can handle all those reports. We also have a robust restitution engine that very quickly can go back and fix any mistakes or any oversights. We also have a lot of employee self-service to try to take some of the burden away from the person who's doing the office work. So things like time off, expense reporting, any sort of employment forms that the government requires, like I-9s or your tax forms, anything like that. Direct deposits, they can change direct deposits. They can have however many direct deposits that they like. They can manage their 401k and their benefits right from our dashboard. Again, we try to take as much burden off of the person who's doing this administration as possible. As I mentioned on the first slide, we offer fringe benefits and trust. So how you're handling your hourly fringe amounts, we help you with those calculations. Be sure that you can take the credits that you've got coming to you. And then we help you manage the money that's left over after the credits are taken. And then lastly, we have exports to over 40 different accounting packages. So we take all that work that we did with the payroll and the job costing and all of that, and we can export that directly to your accounting package for labor costing. And you can do that by project. And we also handle union reporting at that level. So just a couple things quickly of what we do. And then some of our key results. It results in faster payroll and reporting. We'll be talking to Rebecca about that momentarily. Better labor visibility. So with that accurate time and attendance and be able to track job costing by a project, you're able to get a lot better visibility in what jobs are making money, what jobs are not. Cleaner compliance process. All of the prevailing wage requirements are easier to manage. Fringe benefits and wage determinations are all in one place. And very importantly, all of your records are ready for an audit, because if you're doing prevailing wage work, chances are there will be an audit somewhere in your future, and these records are all ready to go, and you don't have to worry about it or sweat that. You also have more confidence when you're doing your public work jobs. You've got better visibility into those requirements, less risk of missing details, as I mentioned, the scheduled increases as an example, and more confidence when you're bidding and managing that work. So hopefully with that increase in job costing and your confidence in that, you can go out and bid jobs more accurately and more competitively. A couple of quotes there at the bottom. We're saving an average of $60,000, $67,000 per year in admin costs alone. It doesn't even include the fringe benefit things that we were talking about. And a quote from one of our clients: what used to take 35 hours for certified payroll does not even take an hour now. So with that, that's about as fast as I can talk. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this back over to Jacob. Jacob?
Awesome. Thank you, Gary. That's some great context here. I'll take a few minutes to give that same kind of background on IVO before we get into the conversation with the Hensley's team. So with that, IVO Systems was founded in 2019 by Eric Christensen, and I was actually our first employee. So before starting the company, Eric, as a third-generation construction family, spent 7 years in estimating and project management at a large heavy civil contractor in Wisconsin, where IVO is based. And that contractor was serious about technology and wanted to modernize their daily operations, get away from that paper, spreadsheets, and endless phone calls just to find out where equipment is or what's wrong with it. And they had already tried a lot of the tools that were supposed to be the best options on the market. But the problem was the field adoption. The software looks great on paper, but it's hard to get people in the field to use it every day, which I'm sure nobody here has ever experienced with a software platform. But that frustration led Eric to quit his job and start IVO Systems. And the goal was to build simple, field-friendly operations software that could help close the gap between the field, shop, and office. So today, IVO helps contractors manage equipment, crews, maintenance, inspections, dispatching, time cards, scheduling, utility locates, and more in one modular platform. Contractors can start with the areas they need help in most, then add other modules over time as their operation grows or as more processes need to come into the system. The big focus for us here is company-wide adoption. When the field team, shop team, dispatchers, payroll team, and the office are all working from different spreadsheets, texts, phone calls, or whiteboards, information gets lost pretty quickly. IVO is built to make that information easier to capture, easier to trust, and easier to use across the company. And now this slide shows the different areas that IVO can support. And the modules highlighted in orange are the ones that the Hensley's team is using today: Track VO, Telematics VO, Maintain VO, and EQ Inspect VO. And I'll focus on these first. Track VO is our equipment tracking module. Many contractors still manage equipment locations with a whiteboard, a spreadsheet, or lots of phone calls. Track VO turns that into an online magnet board where you can see equipment by project or yard and keep that information updated for everyone at your company. If the equipment has telematics, it can move automatically based on geofence data. If it does not have telematics, the team can still move it manually in a few clicks with notes and history attached. And that gives contractors a practical way to manage mixed fleets where some assets have GPS and others are tracked manually. One single source of truth. Telematics VO brings GPS and telematics information into one place. And that matters because contractors often have mixed fleets. One machine might be connected through Cat Vision Link, another through My Kubota, another one through Verizon, and others may have no telematics at all. The goal is to give the team one place to see equipment locations and related information, such as availability and utilization, instead of forcing people to log into multiple systems or rely on separate tracking processes. Maintain VO is the maintenance side. It helps contractors manage preventative maintenance, service history, work orders, equipment details, parts, notes, documents, and repair assignments. PMs can be triggered by hours, odometer readings, or dates, and those readings can come from telematics, inspection forms, or manual entry. When something does need attention, the shop team is notified. They can assign it, track the work, and keep the history tied to that piece of equipment. We won't cover it today, but we also have an enhanced version of Maintain VO called Maintain VO Plus that includes mechanic time cards. EQ Inspect VO handles equipment inspections. Contractors can build custom inspection forms and assign them to equipment groups or individual assets. When someone fills out a form, they can add notes, photos, meter readings, and mark items that need attention. If something is wrong, the right people are notified right away, and that inspection can be turned into a work order inside Maintain VO. The other modules cover the rest of daily operations. At a high level, Schedule VO for crew scheduling with interactive text and verified receipt, Time VO for field employee time cards that auto-populate the assigned project and equipment on site, Dispatch VO for scheduled equipment moves, Utility Locate VO for 811 ticket tracking, Rental VO for rental equipment management, EQ Planner VO for longer-term equipment planning, and Integrations VO for accounting and ERP connections. You'll see a lot of these systems that do one or two of these things very well. And the benefit of having them in a platform like IVO is that these processes all affect each other. Equipment location affects dispatch, dispatch affects scheduling, inspections affects maintenance, maintenance affects equipment availability. So when that information lives in separate places, someone has to connect the dots manually. And what IVO does is give contractors a shared place to manage those moving pieces and keep the right people working from the same information. The results contractors see from IVO depend a little bit on the role because different teams use the information in different ways. For owners and managers, typically the biggest value is visibility. They can see where equipment is, where people are, what work is getting done, and how that information ties back to labor costs and production data. It gives them a better picture of what's happening across the business without having to chase down updates from multiple people. For equipment and shop teams, that value is cleaner equipment records and less downtime. They can see the equipment details, maintenance history, inspection results, work orders, photos, and upcoming PMs in one place, which makes it easier to know what needs attention and what's already been handled. For schedulers and dispatchers, that value is coordination. They can manage crew schedules, equipment moves, and job changes with information that's visible, searchable, and easier to update. And for payroll and office teams, the benefit's cleaner information coming in from the field. That can mean more accurate time cards, better production data, and cleaner exports into accounting or ERP systems. But overall, the common thread here is less time spent chasing information. And that's what you can see on the screen. That first quote here from Seth Zimmerman at Terra Engineering and Construction. They're a Madison-based heavy civil contractor working across excavation, utility work, earth retention, deep foundations, and so on. But before IVO, they were managing scheduling, equipment, and maintenance with a mix of Excel, emails, paper cards, and office conversations. And their maintenance process essentially had a lot of lag time because cards had to be filled out, collected, entered, and reviewed, and turned into reports before the team could act on the information. And after moving more of that process into IVO, Seth estimated that Terra saves 10 to 20 hours a week across field staff, mechanics, maintenance managers, office admins, schedulers, and operations leaders. And his point was the time savings were spread across a lot of people who used to touch the same information multiple times. At the end of the day, the software only works if people actually use it. And you can see the other example here from Monona Plumbing. That value has been that IVO is easy to access from the field, works well on phones, and gives everyone who needs it access to the same information. Whether you're managing equipment, crews, service teams, tools, schedules, or daily field updates, that part matters. So that is the context for the IVO side of today's conversation. Hensley's is using IBO specifically for equipment tracking, telematics, maintenance, and inspections. So we'll get into what that looked like before, how they use it now, and what's changed for their team. So from here, we are going to get into the Hensley stories. So Gary is going to start with Rebecca on the eBacon side, what compliance and payroll looked like before, what changed, and where they're seeing value now. So Gary, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thanks, Jacob. Appreciate that very much. And hi, Rebecca. Welcome.
Hello.
So I'm going to go back to the very beginning. I know that you've been an eBacon client a little bit longer than you've been an IVO client. So all the way back to the beginning, when you were evaluating eBacon, what were you hoping that it could solve, and why did it seem like it was a right fit for Hensley's?
Well, we were hoping to solve the biggest issues that we had with certified payroll and compliance, managing certified payroll reports. eBacon seemed like the right fit because it literally came at the right time. They had me sold on the just one click and all your payroll reports would be done. If some of you out there who know the payroll process, I've alluded our payroll process to an Allegro performance by like an expert pianist, right? Somebody who's just like constantly on the keyboard, type, 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 creating these reports over and over and over. It's funny, I watched an episode the other day. It was just on in the background, Bugs Bunny, the piano concert, piano cartoon. And I was like, oh my gosh, that used to be me, just like constant, sweat dripping and just waiting for the next surprise to come along. If you haven't watched it, please take a moment to do so. It's quite funny.
Nice. So what gave you the confidence that eBacon would work for your payroll and your compliance issues?
Well, the one thing that made the ultimate decision for us, eBacon had never worked with our accounting system before, and it's called Construction Partner. But they didn't shy away from that. They were like, okay, we'll work with them and we'll find a way to make it work. So they accepted the challenge and they were eager to expand that part of their skill set, so that way they could help and offer their services to other companies who were also using Construction Partner or even another accounting system that posed a lot of difficulties.
Makes sense. Appreciate it. Yeah, I had mentioned in the earlier slides that we do communicate with 40 some different accounting packages, and that it sounds like, did you say it was Construction Partner?
Yeah, it's Construction Partner, and we like to joke about it, but it's been with us since the beginning of our time, and that's been 37 years. They work extremely well with the accounting that we need for our material invoices, our job costing, and a bunch of other stuff. The payroll function on it, though, was lacking in so many areas that we needed something more.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that's good to know that if you're using sort of it's not QuickBooks, it's not one of the ones that just comes to mind when you talk to a lot of different contractors, that, we were still able to work with one that was kind of an outlier. And for all I know, since we've integrated with Hensley's, maybe we've got other folks that are also using Construction Partner. So those are kind of conceptual questions as far as what you were looking for and why you chose eBacon. But let's kind of get down to sort of a day in the life. So what was your biggest payroll or compliance headache before you started using eBacon?
So our biggest payroll compliance headache was managing the certified payroll reports. Every single report had to be created manually by myself. And then I had to go on to the DIR website and I had to enter that same information. So it was double data entry every time. The amount of data entry was just extremely time consuming, repetitive, and our company was continuing to grow. So as our company grew, so did the number of weekly reports, right? We started with a manageable, 5 to 10, and that grew 15, 20, 25 payroll reports each week that had to be created manually over and over and over. So the process was extremely burdensome, took valuable time away from my other responsibilities. Not to mention there was an increased risk with data entry. We're all human here. So it made, staying on top of compliance all the more challenging.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you were talking about just the amount of time that it took. So forget about the reporting piece, just from the payroll piece itself. How long did that process take you every week?
So before eBacon, payroll processing wasn't just a one-day task. It wasn't something that I could measure in hours. It was a week-long process. I mean, Mondays and Tuesdays were manic, gathering missed time cards because we were still on a pen and paper,
I was going to ask.
system around here. Yeah. And so I'd call employees, ask for their time. I'd have to write that down. Then I'd have to enter it. Tuesday afternoons, if I had, the stamina after all of the chaos from Monday and most of Tuesday, then I'd be able to finally start the certified, payroll report process. And then that took the remainder of the week, just depending on how many jobs we had, because it was always fun when we had, those non-performance, because that made payroll easy, except when we had payroll, creating that report for every single job that we had, 15, 20 reports a week is insane. Today, though, payroll is still a little bit of a process, but it's not the headache that it once was, because much of the responsibility for capturing the accurate times has shifted onto the employees through the eBacon app that we have implemented. The process is it's streamlined. It gives me back the valuable freedom that I need to take on other administrative tasks, other responsibilities that I have here at the company. So it's been life-changing.
Awesome. So you've already sort of touched on the reporting process. Are there any other certified reports or time savers that have sort of stood out to you?
Oh, sure, yeah. So beyond certified payroll, eBacon has saved us time in multiple different areas. Apprenticeship ratio compliance allows us to quickly verify that we're meeting those requirements. There's no more manually calculating those hours. Employee onboarding has been another process that's extremely streamlined. Our hiring process is now centralized with all the employee information, and it reduces the amount of paperwork that we have.
Yeah, that makes sense. In fact, one of our previous webinars was about the ratio, the apprenticeship ratios, and it seems to be very confusing for a lot of folks. How has working with eBacon changed the way you bid on prevailing wage jobs?
Yeah, so that's another benefit to eBacon. It's changed the way we bid on prevailing wage jobs, because not necessarily changes our estimating process, but it gives us the greater confidence in our labor costs. Because before eBacon, we tended to build in a little extra cushion just in case, we would round up so that way we could avoid missing a wage rate increase or make sure that we were paying the correct wage. Today, we're much more in tune with that. We're much more in tune with prevailing wage rates, anticipated wage increases, gives us the greater confidence that we need, and that we're using the accurate labor costs when we're preparing these estimates. So it allows us to remain a lot more competitive.
Awesome. Yeah, that makes good sense. So what was the thing that made you think, oh, okay, this was the right choice?
Well, like I said before, initially it was their, tagline, like, oh, all your payroll reports in one click. And I was like, oh, that would, change my life dramatically. But because I had such an emotional connection with the payroll process, it was literally my identity. I went so far as to write an English paper about the manic Tuesdays that I experienced with my payroll process. And it was just, it was based on Sisyphus, who was from Greek mythology, who would endlessly push this boulder up the hill and then watch it roll back down. And then the next morning, he would do it again and again and again. And I was like, that's my life. That is who I am. What really truly convinced me, though, was the eBacon team. Once I started working with Jeremy Preston, Det, Aubrey, Andrea, and the rest of the eBacon team, they really spoke my language. And I don't mean English versus Spanish. I mean accounting, payroll, prevailing wage laws, California prevailing wage laws, or employment laws in general, compliance, audit, all of the real world challenges that we face as contractors.
Yeah. Yeah, you have mentioned California. There's actually, out of the 50 states, there's 32 states that have their own prevailing wage laws. So when I told my little story at the beginning of the CFO that was in Arizona, in theory, Arizona should be quote unquote easier because it's only quote unquote federal. It's only Davis-Bacon. It's not an extra layer like you're dealing with in California. So just so everyone in the audience knows, we're set up to work with all the different states above and beyond federal. So not just California, but, and we do a lot of business in California because California is extra fun, but we're able to handle all the different states. So whether it's time, whether it's money, whether it's headcount, can you say anything about what ROI has looked like?
Yeah, when people think about ROI, they usually tend to think of that in like dollars saved. While eBacon certainly has saved us a tremendous amount of time and money, the biggest return on investment has been, for me, it's been my peace of mind. Another part of the return on investment is the support. When I call eBacon, I get a real person, a real human being, somebody who has knowledge, somebody who's responsive, someone who genuinely wants to help, somebody who, if they don't know the answer, they'll find it. So that's been a big return on the investment.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We hear that a lot. They love the fact that when they call, they talk to, unless that person's at lunch or on vacation, they talk to the same person. They don't have to start their story over again. They don't go into a queue. And then 45 minutes later, they find out that their question is a level 2 question. So they go into a different queue. So I appreciate that very much. Real quick, one last question for you. Do you have an example where we, quote unquote, saved the day for you for Hensley's?
Yeah, so this actually just happened within the last 2 weeks. We were working through a restitution case with eBacon. And this case was particularly unique situation because the way that the third party auditor had interpreted the payroll records, I mean, we all have probably been through a restitution case or an audited case, and it is a nightmare. I mean, on top of payroll already being a scramble, restitution cases and or audit cases can add to that headache. But eBacon was able to help with the classifications, clarity. They were able to, and it was actually, in fact, this one was a federal Davis-Bacon case. So it was extremely unique in my sense, because I'm used to dealing with California state prevailing audits and restitution cases. This one was different because it was federal. And so they were able to help show where the compliance was on every single itemized wage statement compared to every single page on the report. And they helped me work through and answer every single one of the questions that the third party auditor had. So it was really incredible.
Oh, that's great. That's a great answer. Thanks for that. Real quick, advice for other contractors. What would you say to other payroll managers that are frustrated or they're struggling with their payroll operations?
I would say do it. You deserve it. You deserve the peace of mind. You deserve the happiness. You deserve to have a team that is supportive and can help work through every single one of your headaches, your questions, your concerns, any questions you have. eBacon has the team who speaks the language, and that in and of itself is worth it for you as a contractor. that's something that you deserve.
Yeah. What about those that are sitting on the fence or thinking about it, but they're not sure?
Again, I would just say, you deserve it. You deserve it, and making that call to better your life is worth it. Definitely worth it.
That's great. Rebecca, thank you very much. And
Sure.
I'm going to turn you over to Jacob to talk about your and Duke's experiences with IVO.
Okay.
Alrighty. Thank you, Gary and Rebecca. That was some great context on the payroll and compliance side. So thank you very much. Now, from here, we'll shift over to the IVO side and talk through both the evaluation process and the equipment maintenance side of the business, what Hensley was trying to solve, what mattered when choosing a new system, and how the team is using IVO today. So we've got Duke up on the stage as well here. And Rebecca, I'll start off with you. I know when we got together back in January with you and Duke to talk through your equipment operations and all of that, when you were evaluating IVO, what were you hoping it could help solve?
Much of the same issue that we were having with our certified payroll reports. We were still on a pen and paper system tracking our equipment maintenance. We were still checking in with Duke, like, hey, where are we at? Hey, what's this? Hey, it was a lot of follow up. And it was still frustrating because Duke came to us 2 years ago, and he's done an incredible job turning our shop into a functioning unit. And he needed something that was going to make his job easier as well.
Absolutely, that's really good background. Thank you for that. And Duke, you were on that first meeting as well. And one of the things you brought up at the start of that call was you've used other maintenance software programs in the past, CMMS systems. So
Correct. Yeah.
what was important to you in the evaluation of a new system, given the experience that you had?
Well, my whole reasoning behind it was I wanted to increase the flow in the shop, but I also wanted to minimize how much time I spend doing the pen to paper, and we have to document everything. And so for me, with the background of these softwares, we kind of played around with the idea. We talked about it for a little bit, but didn't just jump into anything direct just because, again, I've had experience with these other software systems, and some of them can be overwhelming. There's so many different features or things to do just to access one portal. And so when we teamed up with IVO, it really saved us in so many ways, just because it's so simple, it's practical. The portals are all easy to function, and it's direct. Um, it's built directly for what we need it for, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you for that. And so with that simplicity, that ease of use and whatnot, is that ultimately what gave you the confidence that IVO would work for how you wanted to run the shop?
Well, I think the confidence came from after we started working with you guys. I made some time for myself to really get familiar with the software itself, and I was trying, like I told you, I tried to stump myself. I tried to force an error in the system and see where I can break it, and there had to be a flaw somewhere. I can honestly say I have yet to find that flaw. Everything is just straightforward, and I think that's exactly what I would recommend, and why I'm drawn to IVO so much is just because it cuts down on all that time that I was wasting doing other things. The process before would be, pen to paper, write up my work order, and then do the work. But then, I have so many other work orders to complete and all this stuff I'm working on, and the documentation and everything, that I would have to come in on a Saturday just to make sure everything is filed and copied, and we have all the history for the paperwork and everything. It was just a handful, and now everything is just direct right here.
That's a big deal, and that's exactly what I was going to ask about next. What that process looked like, before IVO systems. You mentioned the pen and paper, having to come in on Saturdays to get caught up and everything. Was there anything else there as part of the process that you were dealing with, before IVO, whether that was communication or anything else?
Yeah, so I mean, coming into this shop, I picked up after somebody else, and he didn't have the best habits, and so the communication was really poor. Um, there was a lot of things that I basically had to rebuild a data bank, rebuild the history of the paperwork, rebuild the files on some of these machines, just because there was nothing there, no reports, and so. Yeah, it was this transition came perfect timing, just like Becky said with eBacon. It was perfect timing, just because, like I said, I was already redoing all these things, and then on top of the pen to paper on the weekend, I would copy it and upload it into a computer system. That way, we had an iCloud copy of everything, and just basically setting this shot up or the shop up to run super efficient and smooth. It should be a smooth transition, smooth process, and that way, if anything were to ever happen to me, anybody else can pick up where I left off, and everything is still smooth. Um, that's where you guys came in.
That's fantastic. Glad we were able to help out on that front. And a lot of what you described there really is in our maintain VO module, kind of that like central dashboard for all of your, upcoming maintenance items and whatnot. How do you use maintain VO in your day-to-day work now?
Well, I use it many different ways. For instance, it's saved me once already because we completed a work order and then the machine went out, and then there was another issue that had happened a couple weeks later, and so I was racking my brain. Is this the same area, whatever? I was able to go in directly to that piece of machine, that equipment, go into the history, and I can see every single work order that was completed. I was able to pull up my problem that I was looking for and solved it right then and there. Um, yeah, it's the maintenance IVO portion. It's endless. I feel like on what you can do. I've downloaded some of the equipment manuals, the service record manuals, and all that type of stuff. The books themselves, I've got digital copies, and then I uploaded it direct to the machine accounts in IVO. So, like I said, I mean, anybody can, if you're looking for something, click on the machine in IVO, and it's going to pop up all your information, whether it's the service records or you're looking for the manuals, owner's manuals, or service manual, whatever it is. Now we're able to have it all centralized in one space.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that quick access is absolutely a big deal. And it sort of all works together, right? I mean, you're using not just maintain VO, but track VO, telematics VO, EQ inspect VO as well. I mean, what makes that valuable to have kind of the equipment tracking, the telematics, the maintenance information, those notes, all connected in one system? I know you touched on this a bit already.
I think the most valuable part that we've gained out of this is really the communication factor. Everybody is informed now, and I have it to where I can, even when a work order is completed, it sends a message to my manager and lets him know that this piece of equipment is either ready to be operated or it's ready to be moved to a job site, or, whatever that missing part of communication was, we now have. There's a story on everything, and anybody can access that. Anybody can see where a machine is at. I'm no longer having to make 5 phone calls to track down one little thing. It's everything is within that portal, and it saves us so much time.
Awesome. That is fantastic. And something that we hear from a lot of contractors that goes along the same lines is not just from the communication person to person, but system to system. And that was something that we talked about early on with that telematics data, having multiple sources of data. I believe for the Hensley's team at like Cat Vision Link, My Kubota, Verizon,
Mhm.
some other ones. Is that useful to have that all in one spot?
To have it all centralized in one spot, yes, because I mean everybody wants to know where their equipment's at. If you own it, you want to know where it's at, if it's being used properly, and being able to monitor those things. And before, we'd have to go on multiple different apps or make multiple phone calls and call the operator direct and ask a bunch of questions. There is no need for that now. I can view everything direct through IVO.
That is fantastic. Yeah, definitely a handy feature there. That was one of the first things that we came out with back in 2019 to aggregate all of that data together. So glad that kind of shines through in your operation now. And I guess looking at this holistically, Rebecca, one question for you on this. Obviously a main theme of the webinar here is connecting the equipment operations and the payroll compliance and all of that. From your perspective, how does having that better field and equipment data, why does that matter for the office side of the business?
Why it matters for the office side of the business? Well, because if Duke is out sick, we know where to go. We can go on IVO and we can look up, what's going on if he hasn't already sent us a report. Duke was on a pen and paper system that was not necessarily just failing him, it was failing us as well. He kept immaculate records as best he could on everything that he did, all of his operations. But the communication factor between the mechanics and the office staff, that was lacking, and that has been probably, to me, as far as an office person, that's been probably the best step or best feature, I guess you could say, for IVO and Hensley's, because we've been able to communicate with Duke and make his job easier, and we know more about our equipment now.
Absolutely. And I just heard from Jacob, his power went out, so he's going to join us again shortly. But thank you for answering that. I guess another question back to Duke. Could you share an example of where having better information in IVO maybe helped you solve something faster, avoid an issue, or even kind of like a save the day moment like Gary had mentioned?
Well, yeah, I had a save the day moment I mentioned a little bit earlier. We had completed a work order on a unit. It went out to a job site, and then I believe it was another hydraulic hose that had broken. But I wanted to be sure that it wasn't the same hose, the same line that was having the issue, because then it would tell me there was something else going on in that area. And it turns out it was not the same hose or anything, but just being able to go back and reflect on previous work that had been completed, it allows you to see if you have a bigger problem at hand. Obviously that's what the inspections are for, but being only human, sometimes you may miss certain things. I try my best to make sure everything is visually inspected, or at least put my hands on it and make sure that there's nothing going on. But sometimes things happen. And so being able to go back and visually see everything you've done. I'm very major on pictures. I think pictures are worth more than words. And so I have all my guys, even when it comes to the operators and something breaking down and they have to reach out to me for the repair, I always tell them, just send me a bunch of pictures, because I can pull all the data I need from them pictures. I can post it and go back to it and see exactly what was going on in that time frame just based on the picture. And then your information, the story afterwards, confirms everything. But being able to go back and just, not having to go in my filing cabinet and paper by paper, I can look at a date, put in a date, and it's right there.
Awesome. Absolutely.
Awesome. And thank you, Charles, for that question. I'm back now. Had a little power flicker, but that is the magic of live television down here in Florida. So we are all squared away. And Duke, one other question I wanted to ask was, Like, you've talked about a couple of different areas where we've been able to, support the business, your operations. What's been the biggest practical improvement for you so far? Is that just less phone calls, less time spent chasing down information, or something else?
I feel like I've had more time to actually be turning wrenches, or if I'm not turning wrenches, we have a couple people in the shop now underneath me, so I'm able to direct the guys into what they have to do, and basically the scheduling and whatnot. There's the communication that's really the major factor in this, and it's closed that gap up tremendously. But it's also allowed me to have better better historical records on everything. Every inspection sheet and all the things that I would use by hand, you guys were able to get it into IVO. And so again, everything is in one spot, one location, whether I have to change to a different machine or look up a history on something, or input information to schedule 90-day inspections, and it alerts me. Like, all these things I would have to do by hand before, mark it on multiple calendars in the office so I know when the day's coming and stuff like that. This has saved me in so many ways.
Absolutely. Well, I'm very glad to hear that. And I guess, along those lines, are there any, additional results or quantified savings that you could share? Maybe time saved, repair costs avoided, or anything else along those lines?
I think that, me personally, I feel like it's a cool feature that I am going to be able to use. It may not pertain to many other people, but I also do I do all the fabricating. So there's times that I'll make, a one-off tool, or I'll fabricate something for one of the machines. That way they can use it in the field or something. But, when you're making something, when you design something with this, you know, it's hard to repeat those steps. And so with this, I can, create what I'm creating. I can take my notes, my measurements, and upload everything directly into an account for the machine I made it for. That way, again, if I'm ever out, if anything ever happens to me, the next person in line can see that and go, oh, he made this for a reason. I mean, do this right here. I leave all the blueprints for you.
For sure, closing the loop. And so on this, your journey has been, worked at companies that have had different systems, coming into other companies with no systems, and now here with IVO. What would you tell a contractor that knows their equipment and maintenance process could be better, but hasn't made the jump to software yet?
Work smarter. Why are you working harder? This is half your battle. When you're stumped on a problem, 50% of that being stumped is you have to write it down. Once you write it down, you can visually see it. You've already solved half your equation. So if you're listening to this, watching this, and you're struggling, make the jump. I promise you, it saves your time. As a manager's perspective, it's easy to work with. It's easy to give direction. It's easy to document. It's easy to do all these things. As a mechanic's perspective, it's cutting down on my time having to do the paperwork. I hate having to grab a pen with greasy fingers and have to do no, I don't want to have to do all that stuff. This cuts down on that. And then as a overall user, just anybody can do it. It's really that simple, and it's that practical. Like I said, I've tried to stump myself. I've tried to create an error in the system, and I can't. I haven't been able to. So it's easy.
That is really great to hear. Thank you so much, Duke. Really appreciate it. And to round this out, one more question for you, Rebecca. Bringing this full circle, over the past several years, you've now evaluated both IVO and eBacon. So having evaluated both of those systems, any other last advice to contractors who might be going through a software evaluation later this year?
Yeah, if you're looking for some answers, IVO and eBacon can give you those answers. They can give you that peace of mind. They can give you the organization that you're looking for. They can give you solutions to problems, your pen and paper problems. They can give you solutions for your employees. If you're on the fence, I mean, make the choice and like Duke said, just make the jump and do it because you deserve it.
Awesome. Fantastic. Well, thank you both so much. We truly appreciate you working with us, joining us for this session today here. Thank you so much. And what we'll do now is I'm going to bring Gary back to the stage now, and we will round out with some audience Q&A team here.
Awesome. So, can you hear me?
Yep. All good.
Okay. Very good. We've got just a couple questions. I think we can get this done by the top of the hour. And I'd like to take that first question that just came up on the screen and combine it with the last question because they're kind of the same. So first of all, for Rebecca, just when it comes to the field folks, how long did it take to get your field guys up and running on the app?
Honestly, not long at all. Most everybody is tech savvy. I don't care what era you come from. I don't care if you have 10 years on my age or if you're 10 years younger than me. Everybody's tech savvy. Everybody has an email. Everybody knows how to. We were talking about football earlier coming up. Everyone knows how to, do a fantasy football league, or everybody knows how to use an email. It's easy. It's really easy. You log on to the app, click that you're clocked in, pick the job, pick the task. It's really simple. So it didn't take our guys long at all. There were some glitches that we had to work through, but that's anything that you start new. I mean, you create it to make it your own, and our employees, they're still figuring things out with it. And they actually, one of the features that they really like about it now that we got it fixed was that they can use the Apple Maps feature. So we put in our jobs, we put the address of the project that they're going to, and they use that feature and it opens up Apple Maps and takes them right to wherever they need to go. So it didn't take them long at all, maybe 3 weeks to kind of get used to it. And I would say that that's being generous.
Great. Yeah, we hear that a lot. We hear from folks that say, I don't think my guys are tech savvy enough. And to your point, I mean, everybody's got phones. Everybody's streaming their video at home. I mean, everybody understands the level of tech that we're talking about. We're not asking anybody to start coding things. So I'd like to combine that then with the last question that we received because it's similar. And this may be a Rebecca and a Duke question or just a Rebecca question. And that was, can you describe what implementation was like for both getting off of, what you were doing legacy and onto eBacon and onto IVO?
So I'll go first here. Implementation from an accounting standpoint, we waited until the end of the third quarter to start a new quarter, and that's just because we're particular about that kind of thing. But implementation was actually great. Jeremy Preston, Det worked with us. I mean, it was every day they would check in with us. How's it going? What do you need? What can I do? And they worked with us until we felt comfortable enough. And I think we worked with Jeremy for the first 3 months. I mean, he was at our beck and call. Anytime we called him, he was right there. And then we were assigned a specific eBacon. I call her my Sarah. She's my Sarah. I call her. She's there for everything that I need. If I'm like, Sarah, I have an error. Can you help me fix it? She's like, sure, no problem, on it. She's quick to respond. She's just a dedicated, what do you guys call it? CSR?
Yeah.
That's what they're called. Yeah, she's a dedicated CSR. So she's our dedicated CSR. And the implementation process was seamless, to say the least.
That's good to hear. How about IVO?
So on my end, implementation for IVO, like I said before, it was very, very smooth. maybe that's because mentally I was already, we were looking and searching for something like this. So I already had a game plan going into it, what I was expecting, what I wanted, things I was looking for. But just sitting down and utilizing it and just playing around with the program itself, it was seamless. It's so simple, I was able to go into every little category and kind of just find my way and just look around and see what's there, how it would work for me and what I would utilize out of it. And yeah, it's simple. It was a smooth transition. I was able to transfer all my notes direct, instead of writing here, I'm just typing it. So
Great. Appreciate that. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks, Duke. Real quick, we just have a couple extra questions. If you can hang on for just a few more minutes, we'll get to them. This is an eBacon specific question. Do you apply fringe benefit credits to employees' 401k, health insurance and stuff? And then how does eBacon help with that process? So I mentioned earlier on that we do help with fringes. If you're doing prevailing wage, if you're familiar with that process, you're required to make an hourly wage, but also an hourly fringe contribution. Almost always the hourly fringe is more than what you're currently providing. So as an example, if the hourly fringe has to be $20, and if when you do a breakdown and your health insurance is a couple dollars an hour and your vacation time is a couple dollars an hour, and you get all of that down, first of all, most of the folks we deal with are just paying those fringes in what we call cash. In other words, you're just adding it onto the paycheck like wage. And that turns out to be a double mistake because number one, you should be able to take credits against that. You're basically double paying. You were supposed to use that $20 an hour to offset the fact that you're offering health insurance and you're offering time off and those sort of things. So that's number one, is a double pay. Number two, let's say there was $6 an hour that you could have taken credit for. That leaves $14 an hour left over. At that point, this is a not as bad of a mistake because it's only a single mistake. You take that $14 an hour and put that on the paycheck. Well, that's better than 20, but it's still something that was never meant to be a wage. And when you put it on the paycheck like a wage, you end up being responsible for payroll taxes. So you're paying Social Security, you're paying Medicare, you're paying general liability insurance, and you're paying workers' comp. Depending on what your workers' comp rate is, you're sitting somewhere around 13 to 15% in tax that you don't need to pay. So the answer to the question is yes, we help apply those fringes to the benefits that you're actually offering. That's the first thing that we do. And then the second thing that we do is we take whatever money is left over and we talk to you about the process of using our bona fide fringe trust, which allows us to set that money off to the side into a different bucket. And if the employee is savvy and has the ability financially, they can use that money in pre-tax programs. But the thing I mentioned earlier that sets us apart is that we also offer the ability for the employee to take that money out on payday. So essentially, they're just getting 2 direct deposits instead of 1, or 2 paychecks instead of 1, whatever it is, system that you're using. So the good news is employees are made whole. Employers don't have to pay that tax. But we do both of those things. So we help with fringe credits, but then we help with what's left over. The next question is specifically to IVO, and that is there a project tracking aspect to IVO? And if so, how does that work?
Absolutely. That's a great question. Thank you for that. And the answer to that is yes, absolutely. So how that works is we have our track VO modules that tracks the equipment that is at each location. We have our schedule VO module, which handles the employee schedules, so communicating where everybody needs to be, what project they're assigned to. And then those two modules combine to contribute to Time VO, which is our auto-populated field employee time card module that folks generally use for project tracking to understand what's gotten done, all of that. How that works is on the time card that the employees or the foreman fill out, if you're using those two other modules, the project that they've been assigned in Schedule VO automatically populates at the top of their time card to select from. And in addition, when they go to add their equipment time to the time card, the equipment that's auto-populated at the top of the time card is the equipment that's at that job site per track VO and telematics VO if you're using that as well. So with that, you're able to track, again, what employees were on what job, what equipment was there, what got done, and all of that information, and then go through your, foreman, superintendent, PM, office approval levers, and then track the project overall at the office level. So as far as examples, yes, absolutely, we do have those on our website under those 3 module names: track VO, schedule VO, and time VO. And another way to see an example of that is in our demos that we do with folks that are interested in IVO. We actually give you access to the software so you can try it out yourself and see how it could work for your business.
Terrific. Looks like we have one last question, so we'll handle that quickly, and that's from Deb. And she said, I seem to have more issues with my subs and certified payroll. Would eBacon be cost efficient for them? I understand you cannot give a definitive cost, but just a relative question. And the way that our invoicing works with our clients, Deb, is that it is all by the number of hours that go through our payroll system. And so we're happy to work with anybody. So it's not a one size fits all. So if it's a smaller subcontractor or whatever, their invoice would be relative to where the amount of work that they're doing, as opposed to a larger subcontractor that maybe has 75 or 100 employees. It's not an annual fee that is going to take somebody that only has 12 or 15 guys in the field and sync them. So it looks like Charles has put a couple of links up in the chat. And if you'd like to schedule a demo with either one of our teams, whether it's eBacon or IVO, you got 2 choices. You can click on the link in the chat, or you can be fancy and take a picture of the QR code with your phone. But we'll be happy to set you up and meet with you and talk you through the process and see if either or both of our systems are a good platform for you guys to use. Again, I'd like to thank Jacob and his team at IVO for hosting this event, this co-branded webinar. It's turned out great. And big thanks to Rebecca and Duke for all of their work preparing for this webinar and doing it with us. We really appreciate it, guys. Jacob, any last words from you?
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Gary. And of course, thank you, Rebecca and Duke. Can't thank you enough for taking the time to share your experience with both of our platforms with everybody today. We really appreciate it. And we're happy to be a resource for any of you going forward, and wishing you a fantastic rest of the summer.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you for all the help.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.